Hi, thanks for joining us. Today we're here with Jacob Aringo. He's a teacher at Herbert Hoover Middle School and a boxing trainer at Rise Combat Sports. Thanks for joining us today, Jacob.
All right. Thank you for letting me be part of
Yeah,
this talk. Yeah.
yeah, we're excited to have you. So I know Jacob from training at what was Fight and Fitness. So I got my shirt today. It's now Rise Combat Sports. And Jacob, you've been a coach there for quite a while, yeah?
Yeah, it's almost been about 10 years for me
Wow.
over there.
Yeah. So you started when they were in the tiny gym?
Yeah, the one on Bryant Street and Fifth and
Yeah.
Bryant in San Francisco. Yeah. So Bunker was there and Ganya was there. And so when Fairtex Daly City closed,
Yeah.
my very last smoker, someone announced that Bunker and Chris were opening up a gym. And so I was trying to figure out where that gym is at. And I figured, oh, it's there. Let's check it out.
And so at Fairtex, you were doing Muay Thai then, right?
Yeah, Muay Thai then. Yeah.
Is that was that your start in martial arts?
That was my start in martial arts.
Okay. What transitioned you over to boxing?
I was sparring some tall dude and I kicked his elbow and I fractured my foot. So I can't kick anymore for a good 5 months. And so I stuck with Paris's boxing class.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I stuck with it.
Yeah. I was wondering if Paris was one of your first boxing coaches.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, he's a really fun guy. And that was the first guy I'd ever taken boxing from, but it's a great class.
Yeah.
Super high energy.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. So you took boxing, you started with Muay Thai, you kind of busted your foot, switched over to boxing for a bit, got hooked on that. So like, how has that impacted your life? Maybe even like the Muay Thai and the boxing?
Yeah. I think it's definitely set a routine in my life, as an adult. Because, if we don't have routine, then we do stupid stuff along the way, know? And so I know it's like, oh, it's 3:00. Let's go to the gym. Let's do our thing over there. Right. So it makes every day a little predictable for me. And two, it's like having been in education for almost 20 years already, it's you get kind of burnt out with the stuff going in schools and you just need another outlet. And so that's my outlet. I need to hit something. I need to hit somebody. I need to get hit by somebody, whatever, And so there is a wellness part of it. There is also a mental health part of it too.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for even adults to learn to play,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally relate to that because I didn't get into Muay Thai until I was in my late 20s. And I was a work from home software guy. So I sat in a desk all day on a computer and I'd come into the gym every night. And it was like, use your body, be around people, kind of have some fun, get the blood moving. It's like such a good routine for me to like in my day instead of like, cracking a beer and watching TV.
I know.
That's funny you say that after school and everything you wanted to go hit something. My wife's an educator as well, and maybe that's after she listens to this, she might pick up some boxing or Muay Thai as well.
So before you were doing Muay Thai at I want to say Fight Fitness, but before that at
Fairtex.
Yeah. Were you active in other sports? Were you like
nope?
Just came into that.
I just came into that. But I was, even when I was about 13 to 15 years old, I was aspired. I wanted to try out boxing. Parents didn't want me to do it, or didn't encourage it. But I just remember like always coming down into the living room, sneaking down to the living room around 10 o'clock, watching USA boxing.
Oh, nice.
And just aspiring to those boxers over there. And it's like, those were really exciting fights in the 90s,
Yeah.
And so I need to try that one out one of these days. And I remembered, I'm almost 21. I got my job. And fortunately there was Fairtex Daly City around my area. And I saw a boxing ring. It's like, okay, this is my time to try it out. It's either between going to a bar when I'm 21 years old or going to Fairtex. And I was like, hey, let me try Fairtex out. And I got stuck with it. Right. I loved it the first day.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you picked the gym. I mean, did you know much about Fairtex? Because Fairtex is like the Muay Thai gym, right? Or was like the Muay Thai gym.
Yeah. Didn't know anything about it.
Yeah.
I was just a sponge, I wanted to
Yeah.
try it out.
Nice. Yeah. And you were lucky then because I mean, those guys at those Fairtex gym, like Bunker and Alex Gong, and those guys were like pretty incredible fighters and trainers. Yeah.
Right.
I felt the same in San Francisco. This is where we didn't mention, but Rise Combat Sports is in San Francisco. Yeah. There's a really strong martial arts community there, and like a lot of pretty incredible training. Which, as an aside, is kind of part of Niahn and I's thing with our protip app, is that we both experienced when we moved and found that the level of coaching that we had previously we weren't able to get in our new spaces, because you get these little hotspots of really great coaching and communities, and then when you move away, sometimes you lose those connections.
Exactly.
So our hope is to be able to build sort of a bridge where somebody, I don't know, out in the middle of nowhere who doesn't have like a local gym could at least send some videos of them doing bag work, and get some feedback so they can kind of, at least try to improve a little bit. You can't really replace in-person coaching, but
you can.
Every bit of feedback.
But I mean, a little goes a long way, right?
Yeah.
A little goes a long way.
And just small adjustments, right? Like you're not going to end up becoming a world-class fighter from remote coaching, but at least being able to talk to someone or get some feedback in a constructive way, rather than just posting on forums and things like that, right? So there might be something there. So
and also I just feel like just looking at like social media and people trying to comment on movements, you don't know the credentials as well,
Exactly.
So they talk, but they haven't gotten hit yet, and they think they know, but they don't know. So
everybody has an opinion, for sure.
Everybody has their opinion.
What was that Tyson quote? Everyone has a plan before they get punched in the mouth.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I guess switching to your coaching experience, Jacob. So I noticed you mentioned that you were a teacher before you got into boxing. Is that right?
I think I got into a teacher I got into education while I was still boxing. Yes.
Oh, so you started boxing first before you started working as a teacher.
Yeah, I started Muay Thai first, and then teacher education came after a little bit later.
Got it.
Yeah.
So I guess how has being a teacher impacted your coaching, or how has your experience as a coach impacted your teaching?
I think they're very similar, right? Yeah. Even if you're coaching, you go back to what good instruction looks like. There is a goal. There is a big picture of whatever movement you want to teach your students, and you backwards plan that one out. And then when you develop the instructions, it's like you start to say, hey, this is the first move, let's scaffold the next move, let's keep practicing the second move, and let's scaffold the last move and put it all together. So that way, these little baby steps will eventually be one complex big step. And as our students get better at these little steps, there's some confidence and some flow that goes along with as they practice. And so that's the goal by the end of each class.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess it kind of touches upon, what do you think makes a really great coach?
I mean, it depends on the context, right? There's me as a trainer and me as a coach for someone who's competing. And so I could definitely speak on someone who does compete. One is, your students well, their strengths and what they need to work on. You are able to assess where they're at all the time. You're able to help them fill the gaps in. And there's also a common vision between you and whoever's competing, you and the fighter, right? That you both share that common vision. It doesn't have to be always about winning, which I hear a lot in a lot of gyms, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that even if the fighter loses or wins, that they feel good about the performance at the end of the day. And there's another part about authentic care. You want the fighter to know from your actions, from your voice, that you authentically care about their success and about what they do. And as long as you hold that, then they're able to work harder. You're able to push them, you're able to pull them back if they need to. But that authentic care needs to be there and set in place.
You made an interesting point about how some of the folks who teach are going to go compete and they want to be, in the ring and they want to be fighting.
Yeah.
But also you get a lot of students, right, who are just kind of coming in to get a workout, get stronger, maybe learn some physical skills.
Right.
How do you balance that when you have a class where you have folks in that class who are looking to be competitive and you've got folks in that class who are just kind of there to get a good workout?
Right. I mean, the class is already designed for beginners and intermediate. I don't go into the advanced things, right. But even with our competitive students, they always will need foundation.
Yeah.
Right. So
fundamentals.
Yeah, they need the fundamentals regardless. There's always some tweaking they can do along the way, even in the beginner's class.
Yeah.
Even for myself, like I joined Paris's class after doing this for a long while. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot about that.
Yeah.
Let's review that again. So there's nothing wrong about joining the beginning class and learning the fundamentals again, because you learn something new about that.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess you touched upon, what makes a great coach or what makes a successful coach. What about on the student side of things? Like what's been your experience in terms of what makes a successful student? Let's say for someone who wants to compete.
Mm-hmm. For someone who wants to compete, I think like what you said, there needs to be a want. There's also a need for it. Mm-hmm. And I think as a coach is trying to figure out why do they want it, right? What's motivating them to want to do this? I have a lot of students who say they want to do it, but when sparring comes along, they get hit and then they stop, right? So that want and that need is not there anymore. So the question is, why do you want this that bad?
Yeah.
So that's the first step. And then after that, it's once you kind of assess where they're at and you see them sparring, you see them going to class and being consistent. That's when I start to kind of hop on the bandwagon and say, okay, you're serious about this. Let's talk about what's coming up in your near future in the next 3 months, right?
Yeah. Awesome. And do many of your students compete? How many? Like, what percentage would you say end up, going towards competition versus training? Maybe even just like self-defense, all that sort of stuff, and that's it.
I think I have a lot more people who do this as a hobby versus competition. Okay. Our clients at Rise Combat Gym are people who do their work from 9 to 5.
Yeah.
So right after work, they come by the gym and they work out. I've only cornered or coached 2 people and have offered advice for other people as well. But I've cornered for this female jiu-jitsu MMA person who did really well on her debut MMA fight, and recently coached this 19-year-old or 20-year-old now with his debut amateur fight for boxing. And so
nice.
Both did really well regardless. Yeah.
Nice. I guess switching a bit to your history, right? So who have been your biggest coaching influences? I think you touched upon a few, but who would you say have been the biggest influences?
I could definitely speak on the non-boxing side of things, right? The more of the educational part, because my first 5 years as a teacher, I was required to have a educational coach, a science coach. And so definitely I could speak upon that one. I think my science coach definitely pushed me in my practice in the classroom. There was a couple things that she did where she asked the really hard questions, the things that make us really uncomfortable about our work with our students. to just checking in with me to see where I'm at. Right. Again, I want to go back to that authentic care. That even as a boxing coach, that authentic care needs to be there in the first place. That relationship between you and the student needs to be there in order for the student to work, in order for the student to hear the feedback, in order for the students to improve. And also from that point, once you establish that relationship, then again, you can push the students, and if the students are not performing well, you can pull them back. And so that's where, as a coach, I'm able to read that and I'm able to see that.
So was that experience with your the science teaching coach, has that really helped shape your coaching philosophy?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because I start to replicate the stuff that she does as a boxing coach now, right? The hard questions. I ask the why questions a lot. It's like, why are you doing this? How might you solve this problem in case this person did this? So there's a lot of like, here's the sparring, here's the first round. All right, after the first round, let's debrief. What went well? What didn't go too well? What do you need to change for the next round? Yeah. And so that constant debrief needs to be there in order for the student to improve and to understand how to solve that problem with his or her opponent.
Yeah. And it's funny, earlier you mentioned like scaffolding as well. I know that's a big part of, as an educator, introducing concepts and then working your way up to the more advanced stuff, right? So
exactly,
you could see that it's kind of shaped how you think about giving instruction. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And I'm taking your classes, and I'm taking your classes, Jacob. And I remember I can see that bit too, where you come in, you've got it back in the middle, we're in a ring, and you're working your feet and you're moving in a circle, and you're making sure you're just walking right. That was the first thing, is like, you're not even punching. You just make sure you're stepping and sliding and stepping and sliding. And once you can walk, okay, we'll add some hands.
Exactly.
And it's like, and I've had classes where they throw you everything at once, and it just feels overwhelming. You're like,
it does. I think in order for beginners to be successful, you don't want to overload students cognitively, right?
Yeah.
Step by step until mastery happens with the little steps along the way, right?
It's the Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off to start with.
Exactly. Right? But I want to punch, man. I want to punch.
Exactly.
I think with martial arts too, and boxing, that is so important, because when even if you maybe never really get to compete, but if even you're just sparring and stuff, there's so much stuff that has to be innate and automatic, because you don't have time to constantly think, okay, I'm going to plant my feet, I'm going to do this. You're responding in real time and hoping your instincts and your reactions have been drilled into you so you're doing the right things.
Right.
Which I always struggle with boxing, because as soon as it gets heated, I drop out of my boxing stance and I go into a big square Muay Thai stand and then start taking hits to the head, which can be a real challenge to kind of work out these drills that you burned in one place.
Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I guess, to that point, what's a surprising thing about, coaching boxing that folks might not know?
You mean, is it coming from the perspective of a coach or coming from the perspective of a student?
Let's go from the coach's perspective first.
From the coach perspective, I think there's this assumption that because you're a coach, you've done X amount of fights along the way, right? And just want to put this one out there. I've only done probably 3 or 4 amateurs, mainly Muay Thai. Yeah. I did lots of exhibitions, not really amateurs for boxing, but the thing is, you learn a lot along the way, right? And I think what good coaches do is they just know how to put instruction together so that the student is able to be efficient in what they need to get to. And so I'm using that as a strength of mine as a coach, that I'm a good instructor. I'm able to know what the goals of the students are, and I'm able to put together instructions so that the student is able to act on it, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's the classic thing, right? Where great players in any sport might not necessarily make great coaches, and great coaches haven't necessarily been great players, right? And it's almost like at times the things that we learn just being in the environment can lead you to become a great coach without necessarily reaching like the greatness as an athlete yourself. Like, Michael Jordan's coach is not, Phil Jackson was a good player, but not a great player, for example. Right. So
exactly.
It's one of those things, but he's a great coach. Nobody can question that. So it's awesome. That's a really good tip. And I guess, one final question from me about your coaching experience. Do any of your students at school, if you see anyone getting bullied or whatever, do you tell them, come join me in my boxing class after?
No.
Or is that not allowed?
Not allowed. I always say it's like, even in class, like I see pushing, shoving in class. I tend to stop that, and I think there were a couple fights at school where I was in the middle of it, and I had to grab one student and separate them, put myself in danger of that one, right? And so try not to be the perpetuator of violence in class, in school, right?
That makes a ton of sense.
Even though they know I do it, right?
Okay.
They know.
That's awesome.
But I think I want to also add one more thing to that whole question that you said about what people don't know about coaches is we don't know everything, right?
That's true.
And coaches also need to be learning along the way. Like I only know to a certain points. I know because I only know up to what Paris has taught me, right? And I only know up to my experience and how I add that experience to what Paris taught me, right? So I'm always doing my research. There was a couple months ago where I went to a boxing clinic for my boxing license or passport, right? And so it's like, wow, another thing to add to my plate right here, to transfer into my classes. And so again, coaches need to have a growth mindset. It can't be just you're set in place. You need to be constantly learning along the way because the sport is evolving constantly. And so you have to catch up with the evolution of it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Because I've had a variety of coaches and, moving around. And I think it's really true that even as an athlete, you want to keep learning and work with different coaches and find, because each somebody has something to offer you. Some things may work really well for you. Some things that work for your coach may not work for you.
Right.
So you have to kind of work with different folks and kind of see and put that all together. I was thinking it's a fascinating point because it really is about getting kind of like a broad picture of all of the things.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you don't really compete. Do you do smokers or anything anymore, or are you just coaching now?
Dude, I'm 42 years old.
Yeah, same.
I'm 42, man.
My last smoker was 2014, and I broke her in. And I was like, I'm good.
Yeah, my last exhibition was when I was 36 years old.
Yeah,
and after that, what happened? My last smoker was when I was 36 years old.
Yeah,
and I just felt like I was not as spiffy and sharp as I needed to. I felt that, and I was going up against a 20 or 19-year-old who was doing amateurs already. And so I felt my age already at the time.
So I know nothing about the tiers. So you mentioned exhibition, smokers, and amateurs. How does that? How does that work in terms of the levels?
Yeah, so smokers are now in California it's not allowed anymore, but back in the day.
I remember it was off and on. Like when I first started, we could only do them on Indian reservations because it created the California law. Mm-hmm. And there was a while where it was kind of like inter-gym competition.
Inter-gym. So we renamed it so that it's not called smokers. But those are not allowed anymore. But the difference between them is smokers are good for people who just want to, kind of feel out what it feels like to have an audience right in front of you and to it's basically glorified sparring.
Yeah, it's shorter rounds
with people.
Usually shorter rounds, a couple minutes. Usually 3 rounds, right? It's the same for boxing. It's pads. So I was at headgear, shin pads.
Shin pads. Yep.
I feel like it's a little bit more where they'll stop the fight, they'll slow the fight if it's a mismatch, because a lot of times it's people who are completely new. I do know some amateur fighters use smokers as a way to prepare for fights. So you can get into, as a student, you can get into a smoker and get in with a ring with somebody who's got a lot of experience. And that happened my first time. It could be quite a wake-up call. So the gyms and the coaches talk to each other and try to match up people that are decent matches and stuff. But it's kind of like I always thought of it sort of like a gym level, locally organized sort of thing. But you can get a pretty big crowd. I remember the first time I did one, you're up there in little tiny tie shorts, feeling kind of naked in front of 50 people with the guy across the ring from you who wants to kick your ass. And it's quite a moment,
Those are fun days.
Yeah. I mean, they're real memorable.
They were.
And I always appreciated I didn't go up into the amateur level. I only ever did smokers. But
really? I thought you did an amateur at one point.
No, I never did quite an amateur. I think the hard part for me was I was always a full-time working person. And then I was already by the time I was reasonably competitive, I was already in my early 30s, which is still young enough. But I think I had a hard time just being in kind of consistent shape to be at that level, because the level of athleticism starts going up pretty quick too. And I'm a desk jockey, so I'd come into the gym, I'd train at nights and try to be in pretty good shape. Did a bunch of smokers, which I really liked because that was an opportunity to take the pad work and the training and the partner work and just put it in sort of like real time. You're responding in real time. You're reacting to like a bit of chaos and trying to control the chaos and ride the wave and see if you can you control this ring? Is this person going to control this ring? And it's a really nice way to test that and dip your toe without needing to necessarily be like a pro athlete.
And also it's like the part that I miss about smokers is the whole thing of, you could set that's your time, that's your next checkpoint along the way. That's your next goal. Right.
You're
versus my next goal is not the amateur, but my next goal is to do the next smoker. And so that motivated a lot of the students to work for that. Even if they didn't want to do an amateur level fight, right?
I know with the smokers, that little bit of fear of knowing what's coming up got me into the gym every day. Because, you start running, you want to be ready. You don't want to get there and be tired and not know what you're doing.
Exactly.
So I'm asking some more about competition. I think you've spoken to a lot of these things about how you train somebody differently for fighting versus kind of just, learning. But do you have like specific advice that you give a student who's kind of preparing to or getting ready to move into their first fight? Or maybe even just thinking about getting into fighting?
Yeah. I always say, do you really want to do this? Because if you can't take the first punch, then you're not the right person for the job.
So I always do it and train.
Yeah, I remember the last student that competed and that I cornered for. I remember him coming up to me last year and he specifically said, I want to do an amateur fight. And I asked that same question, are you sure you want to do this? And then he set up his first private. And after his first private, we did a little situational sparring so he gets to work those moves with me. Right. And after I lightly jabbed him in the face. Right. He kind of stopped there and I asked him the question, are you sure you want to do this? Right. And I think and it depends on his reaction, right? And his reaction was he was really hungry for it. It's like, okay, let's move forward. So it really depends on what the reaction is after that happened.
It's quite a moment the first time you get actually hit.
It is a moment. The whole thing of being flushed around the face and people watching you and your ego going down because of that. All that stuff.
And staying focused, just being like, okay, that's a moment, gonna keep moving. Because there's no way you get out of the ring without getting hit. You're gonna get hit. I think
expect that to happen.
Pretty important to know. So that kind of speaks to, I think, a bit what you were talking about is like how you know when someone's ready is if they can get in the ring, do a little gentle sparring, eat a couple hits and just roll with it, then maybe that's how you know when someone's kind of ready.
That's how I know. Yep.
So you said you corner fights for some of your students? Or
I did.
Fights? Yeah. Is there anything you do for yourself or for them to like kind of calm the butterflies and get ready kind of pre-fight?
Yeah, I bring board games.
Oh yeah.
I do.
Yeah.
So I brought like uh for the person's last amateur.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just brought a whole bunch of board games. I brought chess, I brought Battleship, I brought Uno.
Is that
I
just
brought
you
card
kind of
games.
distracted, not just sitting there worrying the whole time?
That's it. Because I remember being in that position
Yeah.
and having nothing to do and watching people
Yeah.
shadow box and the music being
Yeah.
held loud. It gets to you after a while.
And people might
right?
not know you do a lot of waiting. You know, you show up.
Yeah,
to
you
compete,
do.
You might wait for hours and you're
Yeah.
thinking about the fight. You're looking around the room. You're seeing these people. It's a lot of sitting there, you know, with the opportunity for the anxiety to kind of build.
Yeah.
As if you weren't scared already of, you know, going in and fighting someone.
I know.
You just have to wait and sit there longer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so any way that I can do to distract them from that anxiety and that stress, that's my job. I'll bring the board games and I'll make the experience fun while we're waiting for those 3 or 4 hours until we fight.
That's pretty clever. I wish I had thought of
that. Yeah. Now you know.
So do you have, or can you think of like a worst or bad sports or performance experience and kind of what you might have learned from that?
You mean like from my point of view as a student?
Yeah, maybe he's like, even as a smoker or even anything really. But
let's see. I could think of two. I could think of 2 moments, right? And I remember my third smoker at Fairtex, where I didn't train as much as I used to, right? And I felt confident going into it.
Yeah.
But I got my ass whooped by that one person. And I knew more than that person, but I got my ass whooped. Yeah. And so I remember Bunker yelling at me after the fight.
Oh yeah.
Because he I mean, like really yelling. Like you don't see him angry. He was just pissed off about it.
Wow.
And so that was a wake up call for me to make sure I do my road work, that I do my homework outside of class, that I go to class at least 4 times a week. So that really lit a fire underneath my ass.
And
right?
if anybody
I do better.
knows Bunker, he's a very sweet, very quiet, very mellow guy. So
until that happens. So that was one episode, and the next one, I'm just trying to recall. It was my first amateur at Fight and Fitness, and I remember the week before my amateur getting really sick. I had a cold. I remember that, and I still went with the fight anyways because I mean you trained 2 months before it, and then you're going to drop out the week before. I'm not the type of person that's going to do that.
Yeah. But
what I learned from that experience is this whole thing of self-care along the way. I think trainers will push you in the gym. I think that's a responsibility to do that. But I think there's another responsibility on the side of the fighters to say, to kind of be aware of what their body is doing. Right. And if your body is feeling like it's really worn and tired, you're not going to perform in training well the next day. And so it's okay to take breaks along the way. And do a little self-care because that's what your body needs. And if you don't do that, your body's going to keep catching up. And all of a sudden, poof, you got a cold and you have to deal with that. Right. So self-care is needed along the way.
Yeah. I've heard stories of folks with overtraining and just, you're trying to push yourself, and then there's that edge where you can maybe just go a little too much.
Yeah.
And their question for you is what do you think is the toughest aspect of being a coach?
To being a coach, I think the question of when the time of someone's fight comes along, the question of did I do enough?
Okay, yeah,
that always comes up.
You can't be in the ring with them.
No,
just in the corner. Yeah.
But also, there's that question that comes up at first, but there's also a thing of I did all that I could,
right?
And it's up to the person to make those decisions because at the end of the day, it's not the coach; it's the person making those decisions along the way. inside the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. If they're able to make those decisions, then I did my job as a coach. Even if they made some mistakes along the way and they made good decisions, I'm happy about their performance.
Nice.
Did you, I guess on that subject, did you find it easier to be the fighter yourself or be the coach when you're ringside?
They both have their challenges.
Yeah.
I think as a fighter and as a fighter, my motivation was a little different, right? I think it was more about like, I want to make sure that I make my coaches proud and that make my gym proud. And so that puts a lot of pressure on me to do that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But as I got older, that motivation changed a little bit. I want to make sure that I do well for myself, right? Versus me fighting for a gym. I want to make sure I'm fighting for myself. So that motivation changes along the way as you get older.
Got it.
But as a coach, I think like what I said, if I feel that if the student felt good about their performance, then I feel good about what I did. Right. Because again, it's a shared goal,
Yeah.
It's a shared vision between me and the student. And if we're both on that same page and that student followed those directions, I'm happy. Right.
Makes
and
sense.
he or she should be happy as well.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think we're going to get close to wrapping up, but
Yeah.
I guess a couple of final questions. What is a common mistake you see beginners making when they come to boxing?
Yeah, hands down, and being in the weirdest stance. Two
Things. Everybody wants to see, so they're here, and they just like,
yeah.
You're like, if I can see you.
Or they do the chicken wing thing.
Yeah.
There's a chicken wing thing. Yeah. Yeah, hands up, instance. Yeah.
Awesome. And then what is your pro tip for aspiring or new martial artists or boxers?
I think the priority is fun. Do it for fun first.
Yeah.
Because when things are fun, you're going to learn faster. Yeah. I always believe in that. When you play, you learn faster. When you go in there hella serious about competition, but you have no foundation, it's like, I always talk to my students about this whole notion of fixed mindset and growth mindset. Yeah. When you go in there thinking you know all that, you have a fixed mindset, you're not going to grow. But if you go in there with fun and with an open mind and you're like a sponge, you're going to have fun and you're going to grow at the same time. So come in with a growth mindset.
That's awesome. All right. Now the rapid fire round. We'll
okay.
close off with this.
All right.
Okay. First question. Favorite boxer?
James Toney.
Cool. What would you want as your walkout song?
That was a hard one. But I've always considered myself to be an underdog. And so there's a song called Underdog by Alicia Keys. So I would want that as a walkout song.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. What about favorite boxing gloves?
Fairtex, Mexican gloves, laced up, make sure they're yellow.
I was going to say yellow gloves.
Nice.
Yellow gloves.
That's very specific. That's awesome. Favorite exercises?
Favorite exercises, anything with kettlebells, anything with battle ropes or Bulgarian bags, plyometric body weight type of exercises, anything that's complex that keeps my mind going.
Cool. And then least favorite exercises?
Running.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think that's it. That's all the questions we had.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jacob, for your time. This was fantastic. I learned a ton.